Learning to say no to people you like or people that you want to like you. This sounds a lot easier than it is for at least most people I've met. When I ask most people, like, do you frequently say no to people you like? They answer no. Oftentimes, people will say yes to someone, especially someone they like, to the point that they begin to hate that person. This is an interesting phenomenon because it does happen all the time. People will put themselves out there for someone over and over, slowly building resent and poisoning themselves. And eventually, it turns into an explosion of anger and hatred at this person who really has no idea and just thought the other person didn't mind doing it. And they might, internally know that they're kind of taking advantage of that person, but if the other person doesn't seem to mind, it's their job to say no. And this is something I myself have been guilty of many times. I mean, most of the things I'm aware of as problems I first notice inside myself. That's just how things work. You see something inside yourself and then you can see it in other places as well. Although this can run into the problem of giving you tend to press your experiences onto others where they might not fit. So it is best to use a soft touch, as they say. Nevertheless, saying no is important. And a lot of people never learn how to do this. And the only times I hear using no brought up, the only times I can think of is it's to mess with people's heads, like, with the pickup artist stuff and shit like that. Um, that's the only time I can really think of hearing anyone talk about learning to say no. Maybe in therapeutic circumstances, books, but I try and stay away from that stuff because it's too easy to poison my own mind unless I'm going to specifically learn about something. Um, saying no, it's tricky because you want the person to like you or the people to like you, and you want to do it quite often. And this is the expression, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. These are some of those intentions. You're trying to be nice, but you are slowly building resent and anger, and the other person isn't aware of it. Now, there is another kind, which especially can come from groups, which is feeling the pressure to say yes because the group all believes one thing and wants you to believe the same thing as well. This is a bit more complicated because I don't want to tell people just to say, like, fuck your social circle. Like, but I would certainly say you should look out for yourself first because no one else is going to. And, this is an important thing. You have to be able to say no, and you have to learn to say no as well. It's quite often I'll see people, especially with things like relationships, where they've never had a relationship and they just expect their first relationship to work out. And it's like, well, do you have any practice at this outside of like imagining what it's going to be like, which is not a very effective tool because it's usually they have a couple fixations that they tend to hyper focus on. But the actual experience of living with another person and dealing with another person every single day is a bit different. It's a bit more complicated. But if you've never done something, you can't expect your first time at bat to be hitting homers. That's just not the way things work. Even though in the movies they tend to, and people are just naturally good at things, and like, he's a natural. They're these circumstances are so few and far between. I prefer to act as if they don't even exist because they don't factor into a practical analysis of a situation. And it's the same thing with saying no. If you never say no and have no experience saying no, you're not going to be able to say no. It is something that you have to build up a tolerance to because it's antisocial. And unless you're kind of like an antisocial prick like me, like where you just want to be alone, it's not even that I want to be alone. It's just I have such major trust issues that I can't get over. But unless you have some kind of pre existing dysfunction, and believe me, these are not good things. I'm not saying these things as a positive trait. Like, it does far more damage to my life than it does benefit. But if you have no experience with it, it's not something that will just come naturally. You quite literally have to force yourself to do it. I even had to do it with myself, as antisocial as I am. Like, I would have to force myself to say no to people, especially people I wanted to like me. You know, it's not as easy as it might seem. There are times where like you can have a wall up with them, especially with things like homeless people asking for money. If you live in a city and there are always very aggressive people asking for money, you kind of get hostile towards it. But you're not looking for friendship from that guy. You're looking for that homeless motherfucker to get the fuck away from you. And so that's kind of different. But still, a lot of people find it difficult to say no even in that situation. Humans are social creatures. We are taught, not even taught, but it seems like there is a intrinsic desire just naturally to say yes if someone asks you something. There's a lot of studies done on this. What is it? Influence, the practical application and science of something like that. Influence was the name of the book. I can picture the cover, but I can't picture the guy's name. It was a very good book, and they cite a whole bunch of studies and that. I tend to stay away from studies and things of that nature because then you have to go over the whole study. You have to go over the person's history to find out what pre-existing biases they have, and if they wanted, to specifically prove something. It's such a sketchy world that I tend to just stay away from it and try to use my own life and my own experiences, which is, just as flawed as anything else, but it's, at least I'm certain of it. As I always try to say, and it's not just something to close a video, take it for what it's worth. Uh, you have to make that decision on your own. And that's why I often say contradictory things about myself, because people are contradictory. Um, People can hold an opinion in the morning and disagree with it by the night. And that doesn't make them crazy. They just feel two different ways about something because they're in two different moods. And that tends to be human nature. And the time you ask someone that there's a great degree of variance for their answers. And it might not even be contradictory, even though it appears so. Humans are complicated, emotional creatures. But the use of saying no for keeping your own sanity is important, because all the way back at the beginning, if that person had just been able to say no, I can't do this for you right now, then they wouldn't have exploded with hatred at that other person eventually. If at any point they would have just said, no, I don't feel like it, I'm tired, I can't do it today, whatever, that would have, at least for in that way, saved that relationship. There's probably some other issues if that's the kind of relationship people have, but nevertheless, at least that landmine would have been averted. It is a powerful thing, learning to say no, and it is something, like I said, I rarely hear people talk about. And I'm aware this isn't the greatest scholarly lecture on it, but nevertheless, I never see or hear people bring it up outside of fucking with people's heads and shit like that. And it's not about manipulation, it's about helping yourself and looking out for yourself first, because no one else is going to, despite what people might tell you. And maybe even they feel that way for a year or two. But the heart is a fickle thing. People get bored of one another. People change. People grow. I will always tell people, especially people I'm in relationships with, either we grow together or we grow apart. And even then, that can't save everything. A girlfriend once told me, love isn't all you need, because if it was, our relationship would have worked. Take it for what it's worth.